Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It started like any other quiet Wednesday afternoon. The sun was casting a soft golden hue across my living room, catching the delicate folds of my sheer curtains as they danced in the breeze. I was sitting on my couch, cradling a cup of chamomile tea, flipping through a book I'd already read twice, when my phone buzzed beside me. I almost didn't look at it. I thought it was probably another scam call or some delivery notification. But then I saw the name flash on the screen. Ethan Coleman. It stopped me cold. Ethan was my best friend Lydia's husband. Or rather, he is. They've been married for 25 years. We've all known each other forever. Lydia and I met in college, and we were inseparable from the start. Roommates, travel buddies, co-maid of honors at each other's weddings. Ethan came along in our late 20s, and he was just the kind of man you hoped your best friend would end up with. Steady, gentle, and quietly charming in a way that grows on you. Still, he's never called me. Not once. Not alone. Not like this. My heart did a little somersault as I stared at his name. A dozen questions raced through my mind. Was Lydia okay? Had something happened to one of the kids? I picked up quickly. "Hey, Ethan," I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice cracked just slightly. "Is everything all right?" There was a pause, just long enough to feel unnatural. Then his voice came through, calm and familiar, yet carrying something. Heavy. "Hi, Sarah." Yeah. Everything's okay. Sorry to call out of the blue. I was wondering if you had a few minutes to talk. In person." "In person?" Sure," I replied slowly, trying to mask the confusion laced with sudden anxiety. "Is Lydia with you?" "No," he said softly. "She doesn't know I'm calling." The silence on my end must have spoken volumes. I felt my chest tighten. Something was off, seriously off. But I couldn't hang up. This was Lydia's husband. A man I respected, trusted. A man I thought I knew. "All right," I said after a breath. "Do you want to come by here?" He hesitated, then said, "If that's okay. I'll be there in about 20 minutes." I hung up and just sat there. The tea had gone cold. I wasn't sure whether to be worried or unsettled. There was nothing about this that felt ordinary. I changed into something more decent, a light cardigan over my cotton dress, and tidied up the living room, though it was already neat. I wasn't sure why I felt the need to prepare, but I did. When the doorbell finally rang, I took a second to steady myself before opening it. Ethan stood there, his hands in the pockets of his navy jacket, his expression unreadable. He looked tired, older than I remembered, like something had been weighing on him for a long time. "Hi," he said, his voice gentle. "Hi," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Come on in." He moved quietly into the living room, glancing around like he was seeing it for the first time, though he'd been here many times before with Lydia for game nights or dinner. We sat, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he looked up at me with eyes that were glassy, conflicted, yet searching. "I know this is strange," he began, "and I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like I was at a breaking point." I swallowed hard. "Ethan, what's going on? You're scaring me a little." He sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "It's about Lydia. About us. Things haven't been right, not for a long time." I didn't know what to say. Lydia had never mentioned anything. Not once. "We're not talking anymore. We're just existing in the same house," he continued. It's like she's drifted away from me. Or maybe I from her. His voice cracked just slightly, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in him that I hadn't expected. A raw honesty. "I don't know why I came here," he said, shaking his head. "Maybe because you know her better than anyone. Or maybe because I needed to see someone who remembers me when I still had warmth in my life." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I was caught between compassion and confusion. "Ethan, I don't know what to say," I admitted. He looked at me then, really looked. "You always listened. You always cared. And I've missed that. I've missed being seen." His words lingered in the space between us, almost too intimate, too open. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind was racing. And then, quietly, he asked, "Can I just sit here with you for a while? I won't say anything more. I need to be around someone who feels safe." That I could do. I nodded, offering a small, unsure smile. Of course. So we sat, in silence, the kind that said everything words couldn't. But something had begun to shift, something delicate, uncertain, and full of unspoken truths. I didn't know what was coming, but I felt the ground beneath me subtly change, and I knew this was only the beginning. The next few days were strange. After Ethan left that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, or maybe more accurately, what hadn't happened. There was no grand confession, no dramatic moment. But the silence we shared spoke volumes, and it lingered in my home like the scent of his cologne, subtle but impossible to ignore. I told myself it was just a friend reaching out, a man at his wit's end, grasping for familiarity in a world that had gone cold. And yet, when I closed my eyes at night, I kept replaying the way he looked at me. Not romantic, exactly, but deeply personal. Like he saw something in me he hadn't seen in a long time. And that unsettled me. Didn't tell Lydia. How could I? She was my best friend, and yet, in that moment, I felt like I was carrying a part of Ethan that wasn't meant for her. Or maybe it had once been, but he no longer knew how to share it with her. 3 days passed before I heard from him again. Another text. Simple. Careful. "Would you mind if we talked again? Coffee? Just to clear the air a bit." I stared at the message for a long time. I could have said no. Probably should have said no. But something in me wanted to understand. Wanted to know where this was going, if anywhere. So I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe tucked behind a row of bookstores on the edge of town. It was a place we all used to go in our younger days. Back when life felt wide open and nothing felt quite so complicated. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the corner, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee. He smiled when he saw me. A tired, tentative smile. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. "But I figured. We had more to talk about." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, we do." There was a pause before he spoke again, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his cup. "I know how this might look, me showing up like this. You being Lydia's best friend. I don't want to make things harder for you." I appreciated that, his awareness. But I was still guarded. "So why are you here, Ethan? Really?" He looked up at me, and I saw it again, that vulnerable ache just behind his eyes. "I'm not here to ask you for anything. I just needed to say it, out loud, to someone who knew us both before we lost who we were." That line hit me in the chest. Before we lost who we were. I'm not angry at Lydia," he continued. "She hasn't done anything wrong. Life just pulled us in different directions. The kids grew up, the house got quiet, and suddenly we didn't know how to be alone together." I nodded slowly, hearing the heartbreak in his voice. It was the kind of sadness that crept in slowly over the years, like ivy crawling across brick until the cracks couldn't be ignored. "And then I started remembering you," he said gently. "The way you used to laugh at my terrible jokes. The way you and Lydia would sing in the kitchen, off-key and too loud. The way you always looked at people like they mattered." His words wrapped around me, warm and confusing all at once. "You never looked past me," he added. "And lately, I've needed that." I swallowed hard, unsure what to do with the truth he was laying out before me. "Ethan, I care about you. I always have. But this, whatever this is, it's dangerous territory." He nodded. "I know. That's why I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to understand why I showed up the other night. I needed to remember that connection still exists in the world. Somewhere." I looked down at my hands, folded in my lap. "I never expected this," I whispered. "From you. From us." "Neither did I," he said. "But here we are." The moment stretched between us like a tightrope, fragile and tense. Finally, he sighed and stood. I should go. I stood too, not sure how to end a conversation like this. A hug felt too personal. A handshake, too formal. So we just stood there, facing each other in the quiet of that little cafe, both of us unsure of the rules anymore. "Take care of yourself, Sarah," he said softly. "You too, Ethan." And then he walked out, leaving behind the faint echo of words I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. As I watched him disappear down the street, something shifted inside me. Not a love awakened. Exactly. But a part of me I hadn't touched in years stirred. A part that remembered what it felt like to be seen. Not as a mother. Not as a best friend, but as a woman. And that realization unsettled me more than anything Ethan had said. Because now, I had something to wrestle with, too. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. I kept waiting for Lydia to call and tell me she knew something. Anything. That she sensed a shift. That she felt the same subtle unraveling I now felt every time I tried to sleep. But nothing came. No cryptic text. No drop in her voice. She was her usual warm, lively self, chatting about a new recipe she wanted to try, some book club gossip, or their plans to visit their daughter next month. And I played along. I smiled, I nodded, I laughed when I was supposed to. But there was a tremor beneath the surface, a constant buzzing in my chest that never fully let me breathe, because I was holding something I didn't want, a truth I didn't ask for. And worse, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't just what Ethan said at the cafe. It was the look on his face, the softness in his voice, the way he spoke to a part of me I'd kept closed off for years, a part I didn't even realize had been lonely until he gently knocked on its door. And I hated that. I hated that I, too, now felt like I was crossing some invisible line. A week passed before I saw him again. I was walking out of the grocery store, fumbling with bags, when I heard my name. "Sarah?" I turned, and there he was, standing beside his car, looking just as surprised as I felt. We stared at each other for a moment, like two people who'd been caught doing something they hadn't quite done. "Hey," I said, my voice small, uncertain. He offered a soft smile. "Need a hand?" I hesitated, but nodded. He reached for 2 of the heavier bags without asking and followed me to my car. We moved in silence for a moment, our steps awkward in that shared awareness. When the bags were loaded, I leaned against the open trunk and exhaled. "This is getting complicated," I said quietly, not looking at him. "I know," he replied. "I didn't plan this, Sarah." "You have to believe that." "I do, but believing it doesn't make it less." Confusing. He nodded, stepping a little closer, but not too close. "I just miss something I used to feel. Something warm, human, and when I'm with you, I feel it again." There it was, that quiet truth again, pressing into the space between us like fog. Not quite solid, but impossible to ignore. "Do you want more than that?" I asked him softly, unsure what answer I was hoping for. He paused. "No, I don't think so. I don't even know what more would look like. I just need a connection that feels real." His words hung in the air, and for the first time, I realized we were both navigating a landscape we'd never prepared for, one where the heart doesn't follow the map we expected it to. "I feel it too," I admitted. "But Ethan, Lydia's my best friend. You're her husband. And that line matters." He looked down, nodding slowly. "I know. I wouldn't want to hurt either of you." We stood there, quiet again. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "Would you ever tell her? About the calls? About what I said?" I blinked, surprised. "I don't know. Should I?" He sighed. "Part of me wishes you would. Because maybe it would finally wake us up, or at least give her a chance to know how far we've drifted." "But the other part?" I asked. "The other part is scared it would end everything." There was nothing more to say. Not then. We said goodbye, nothing more than that, and I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool spring air cut through the thoughts swirling in my mind. That night, Lydia called. We talked for over an hour, like we always did, about nothing, about everything. I listened as she spoke about how Ethan had been quieter lately, how she wasn't sure if it was work or just life. I almost told her then. I came close. But I didn't. Because even in my own confusion, I knew something vital. This wasn't about betrayal or desire. This was about emptiness. About human beings quietly unraveling in the stillness of long marriages and long silences. And somehow I had become the mirror Ethan used to remember who he used to be. But where did that leave me? Alone in my kitchen that night, I stared at my reflection in the window. I looked older than I felt, sadder than I wanted to be. But underneath all of it, there was something else, something waking up. A part of me that wanted more from life than just being a friend, or a secret keeper, or a safe place for someone else's pain. I wanted to feel chosen. I wanted to feel alive again. And I didn't know yet what I was going to do about that. But I knew this story wasn't finished. A few days after that conversation in the parking lot, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, brushing my hair with a kind of stillness that felt unfamiliar. Not sadness, exactly. More like weight. Like I had been carrying something for too long that didn't belong to me. The truth was, I hadn't heard from Ethan since then. No messages. No unexpected calls. And I didn't reach out either. But something about that silence said more than any words could. We had both stepped too close to a place neither of us wanted to live in, somewhere between friendship and something unspoken. And now we were pulling back, careful not to let the fire catch. That night, I got a message from Lydia. "Dinner Friday, just us girls. I miss you." I stared at the text longer than I should have. I could have made an excuse, claimed a cold or a late deadline, or anything else to avoid what I knew deep down was coming. But I didn't. Of course. I miss you too. She chose a quiet bistro tucked in a corner of town where the lighting was soft and the air smelled of garlic and fresh bread. Lydia looked beautiful, as always, silver strands tucked into her ponytail, a deep plum sweater that brought out the blush in her cheeks. She hugged me like nothing was wrong. And for a moment, I almost believed nothing was. But once we were seated, I noticed it, the way her smile faltered just a little too quickly, the way her eyes lingered on mine like she was looking through me. "You okay?" I asked gently, sipping from my glass of wine. She gave a small nod, then another pause. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. "About Ethan." My heart stilled. "Oh," I said carefully. She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "We've been off for longer than I care to admit. I keep wondering if I've been too distracted, too focused on the kids, the house, everything except him." I didn't know what to say. "I brought it up last night," she went on. "Told him I felt like we were strangers, that maybe we needed to talk or take a break or something." My throat tightened. "And you know what he said?" She continued, looking me dead in the eye. He said he'd been talking to someone who reminded him what connection felt like. There it was. I didn't move, didn't breathe. "He didn't say your name," she added. But I knew. My hands trembled slightly as I placed my glass down. "Lydia." She held up her hand gently. "Let me finish." I nodded. "I'm not angry," she said, her voice soft. "I don't think you meant to hurt me, and I believe you when you say nothing happened. But Sarah, you're my best friend, and you're part of my marriage in a way. You always have been." Tears sprang to my eyes. "I didn't ask for this, Lyd," I whispered. "I know," she said, "but we're here now, and I have to decide what that means for me. And you do too." I reached for her hand across the table. She didn't pull away, but her grip was lighter than it used to be. "I'm sorry," I said, voice cracking. "I never wanted to be part of that distance between you two. I never wanted to be the person he turned to." "I know," she repeated. There was a long silence between us, one of those silences that stretches the soul. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Do you still believe in second chances, Sarah?" I looked at her, eyes shining. "I do. But I think sometimes the second chance is for ourselves." In the weeks that followed, things changed. Quietly, respectfully. Lydia and Ethan began counseling. It was her idea. He agreed. And though I didn't hear much after that, I knew it was a choice born out of love, or at least the hope of finding it again. As for me, I stepped away from both of them. Not out of guilt, but out of clarity. Because somewhere in the silence I had discovered something important. I was lonely too. Not for Ethan. Not for any one person, but for me. For the version of myself that had once believed in joy without boundaries, in connection without compromise. I started walking more, traveling a little, picking up my camera again. I even signed up for a weekend writing retreat upstate, just me, a cabin, and a blank notebook. And slowly I began to feel the weight lift. The story I thought was about a man turned out to be about myself, about waking up, about letting go of what could have been and choosing, instead, what can still be. And that, I've learned, is where the real love story begins.